All right, guys, we're back. Welcome back to another episode of Speed Up and Hit Your Hits. Speed Up and Get Your Hits podcast. Good grief, it has been a minute. It has been a minute. I have lost the intro, apparently. This is a podcast about shooting, and we are just we're some guys that like to shoot and like to help other people get better at shooting. My name is Billy. With me, as always, I have Nick from Velox Training Group and Brennan from Vortex Edge. And yeah, here we are. We got a bunch of little stuff I think to talk about. Stuff we've been up to this week. Not any big title subjects. We're gonna kind of spend a ton of time on or bounce around a little bit, but should have some pretty interesting stuff. We've it's been a minute since we've got our last episode out because we've been all over the place doing all sorts of the things. Got some major matches on my end and classes for all of us and all that kind of stuff. So we've got quite a bit to catch up on and talk about, I think. But so I'll let you guys kick it off. What you been up to? Anything interesting that the folks need to know about?
Yeah, so I got something pretty cool. So I was teaching a class in South Carolina at a range that has something called I think they call it the Troy's Gate simulator thing.
Okay.
And essentially what it is a force-on-force scenario type thing where you get to shoot at real people with real bullets and no one dies, right? So essentially what this is two rooms next to each other, and then there's a mirror, which is kind of like when you feel it, it's kind of like rubber, but like it's a really good, when you walk in, it literally looks like people are standing in front of you. Pretty cool. So they have real, pretty good role players there too. So when you walk in, you get to engage with them. Yeah, man. So I went in there twice. The first time I went in, a girl turned around, saw that she was holding a revolver. And as soon as she started lifting the revolver, I was like, well, bill drill time, buddy. I've done this before. And I'm pretty sure it was like, a 0.8 draw or something like that. And probably, I don't know, 18, 19 splits. And as I was shooting at her, I saw like a shotgun barrel come around the corner. And I basically just bumped right over to that one and bill drilled that one too, like a retreating bill drill. The second time I went in, the same chick was sitting there like holding a baby, which was really weird because I walked
They
in.
had like a real baby on standby for this.
No. The baby was not on the payroll. This was
okay.
Was like a doll, right? But I mean, the little sucker looked real. But yeah, so I walked in and she yells, obscenities at me, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. You ain't armed or anything. And then here comes that shotgun barrel around the freaking side again, and then hey, here we go, bill drill again, retreating backwards. So I don't know. It was cool. I think it was a neat way to. I think it was a decent way to validate certain skill sets that I already have, right? Me and my AI talked about it on the way home, and he was like, he's a retired third group guy, so this was this was nothing for him. I had never done anything like that before, right? I had no clue how I would act at all. And so yeah, I think it was pretty cool to validate that kind of stuff. And afterwards, they asked me, hey, what'd you see? What'd you feel? Were you scared? And man, if I'm being honest, I didn't feel scared at all. And I didn't think about the shooting at all. Like the shooting piece just happened, which was cool. That was pretty cool to see myself do. I didn't have to think about it. It was just like, see gun, time to draw the gun and do my thing. So not that I'm like an experienced operator now, but that was my experience at that place, and I thought it was pretty cool.
Pretty sure you are, though.
Yeah. I mean, I could probably try out for like Squeal Team 6 or something,
Definitely, man. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, there's obviously lots of different training tools out there, different ways to do it. They all have pros and cons, right? That's that's pretty cool to have a simulator like that where you can actually have like live role players instead of like pre-recorded like scenarios or whatever.
Well,
that a lot of times don't really make sense, right?
Yeah, and I mean,
you're not actually
literally
reacting.
it looks like they're pointing guns at you, and then when they shoot, like you see muzzle flash. I mean, it looks real.
It's also cool to shoot your actual like own gun.
Yes.
Like, most all simulators, regardless of how like realistic it is, like we have a Vertra, and I think it's one of probably the better, more expensive, comprehensive systems out there. And like, yeah, you shoot like a real Glock that's been modified, but like it ain't your gun, you know, and like the trigger's different and like everything's different about it. So that's like pretty unique as far as anything that I've ever heard of.
And like we found out, like it's not really made for like 10 splits, you know.
Not so many of those.
No, but yeah, no. I mean, that is that. What you're 100% right. Yeah, that was the thing. So on this one, Nick, did they have any way to actually like record hits, or is it mostly just like a reaction thing, or could you tell if you actually hit anything?
Yeah, so I mean, he asked me. He was like, "Did you hit him?" And I'm like, "I know I did." Like I know for a fact. Like I know the group is like the size of an A zone in each one's chest, right? Because I was going like as fast as I could. I don't know, 17, 18 splits, something like that. But yeah, and you could like look at the little mirror thing and see the divots. It's kind of self-repairing,
right?
But you can 100% see where the bullet holes go.
Sure.
Another neat thing about it was, you know, he asked me what I saw, and I saw everything in so much like detail. And he was like, "Dude, that's not normal." And I was like, I mean, I don't know, man. This is my first time doing something like this, so it, you know, it wasn't like I was thinking about trying to see shit in detail, but like I saw that chick had it looked like a freaking Wyatt Earp like cap revolver, you know, big ass revolver, and he had a black shotgun. Like I saw what they were wearing, everything. And he was like, "Man, we have really experienced people come in here, and they don't see stuff in that amount of detail." And I was like, "Well, you know, I target focus, so I see it all, I guess."
And like you were saying, I mean, like I said, I'm definitely no operator or whatever either, but like that's been kind of my experience, like force on force and like simulators and all that kind of stuff as well. It's like, and the guys that I shoot with, right? Like what you see is like, if you don't have to think about the shooting, it makes all the problem solving stuff like just so much easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah. We're actually in the middle. We just finished up day 1. We'll do day 2 tomorrow of our concealed carry dynamics class. Essentially, it's like a scenario based concealed carry response to an active shooter type class. And like day 1 is a lot of live fire, and then day 2 is all in the shoot house with sims. And we had this one dude who practices like a decent amount. Like he's not like phenomenal or anything, but he practices a decent amount and like really thinks about his practice. And so we had him doing like single hand draws, right, from concealment. And then we put him in a scenario where we're using photorealistic targets, and we had the lights down. And so he had to like identify stuff with his handheld light and shoot one-handed. And like he did
not gonna lie, y'all just stole my window drill right there. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I was giving Chris a hard time about that earlier today.
I don't care.
He was like, "Yeah, well,
I don't.
No, it's good. It's good."
Yeah. Anyways, my point is, so he shoots it and he comes back. I was like, "All right, so how'd that go for you?" And he's like, "Well, I don't really remember any of the shooting. Like I only remembered like the target ID stuff." And I was like, "That's exactly what you're supposed to do, right?" Like his brain is still wrapped up in the problem solving of it. And like his subconscious skill was there. He didn't think it was, but like it was. He's like, "I don't even remember drawing the gun." I was like, "Well, you did, and you did it really well." I don't know. That's a pretty big theme at like force on force classes and stuff that I've seen. Like 1 or 2 like guys who haven't done any of that. They're like competitive. They come in. It's always like that. I don't know. Pretty interesting theme.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very cool. Yep. No, that's where it's at. I have been all over the place. The fact shoeies, starting with nationals, Optics Nationals a few weeks ago, which was my first time shooting nationals. It was a really interesting experience. Learned a ton. Bunch of interesting stuff happened. Well, I guess we'll talk about it a little bit. Starting with, I guess, the member meeting was pretty interesting. Actually, I had to go to USPSA board meeting, and pretty wild. A lot of drama. A lot of that's been posted on the internet and so forth. We don't need to dive into it too far. Suffice it to say, I think the board's kind of a mess right now. One of the questions that was asked was like, hey, so like where, and we had like a deficit budget this year, like where are things at? And the president was like, things are definitely worse than we expected, but I really couldn't, I could only guess like how much we're off. I couldn't really tell you.
That's epic.
And that just kind of set the tone for the whole meeting. So
cool story.
Pretty interesting. I guess the point of discussion that I think is interesting to take away from that, I see a bunch of people, right, on the internet over the last couple of weeks, basically saying like, oh no, we should all be like pulling our memberships, and not shooting USPSA matches anymore until they fix this, and like basically it's time to boycott USPSA. I have opinions, but where are you guys at? What are you thinking as far as matches and that kind of stuff right
now? I think that if you pull your membership and not shoot matches, then you don't have a voice at all. But like, I'm not sure why you would do that. It just seems like it would just make it worse. Yeah, I wouldn't pull my membership. I would just be heard. You know what I mean? I would be open about my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think
and vote.
Yeah.
I think the really loud voices, at least that I see in the echo chamber that is Instagram and like the shooting Instagram, are not actually that many people. And so like if you added them all up and then it's like, oh no, like each one of you cost USPSA $40 a year. It's like it's like nothing, right? And like you think about all the clubs across the country with the dudes who like don't even care and they're just still paying their membership dues and shooting local matches. Like those are the dudes in my opinion, you have to kind of get on board, and maybe get on board with things like as a club. Yeah, like I could totally understand if an individual's fed up with it and just wants to be out of it for a while. Like totally get that. But as far as like affecting change, like I don't think it's actually going to affect a lot of change unless literally everyone like just quit it.
Man, if I'm being honest, like I love the tactic that our homie Ben uses, like straight up, because he knows that they're not going to agree. So why not hammer on them? And which 100% brings more and more awareness to what's actually going on. So I'm with it. I'm with all that for sure.
Yeah.
Hammer on them and make them look stupid.
Yeah, it's kind of where I am as well. Just real quick, we're not going to harp on this all night or anything, but first of all, I just want to say, like, yes, there are some things I think that are like really bad. Like the board's done some really dumb stuff. They're making some poor decisions. There's a lot of things I wish that would be different. However, like, I think a lot of people who, although I'm 100% on board with you, Nick, like I love Ben's, tactics, and I think that he's making a big positive difference. And a lot of people are more interested in what actually is going on with the org than have been because of that. The sky is not like falling necessarily the way that some folks are being led to believe that it is. USPSA is still the best place to do all the things we've talked about on the podcast as far as, high level competition. It's still a fantastic training tool. It's still where the best shooters in the country are going to be tested in performance shooting. And I don't see that changing anytime soon, again, regardless of what you do with your membership. And so, although there's some things we want to get fixed, and we should definitely be, I think, pushing for some changes and so on and so forth, USPSA is still in pretty good shape as far as when you go up and show up and shoot a match. The main thing I'm concerned about is making sure that basically doesn't get run into the dirt over the next few years, and that we can keep doing what we're doing right now for a long time. And like, you said as well, Nick, I think if, there's essentially, I think, two groups in USUSA right now, folks that are pretty unhappy with the leadership, and then folks that are either intentionally or unintentionally just kind of uninformed about everything that's kind of going on. The folks, like you said, they just kind of show up and shoot matches, don't really want to get involved in the politics, kind of just avoid drama like the plague, and all that's fine. But if all of us who are unhappy just leave, like you said, it's either just going to stay the same or it's going to get worse. Those are really the only two options that can happen. Unfortunately, things happen slowly in USPSA. Like, we can't go replace the entire board tomorrow, but we can replace like at least two of them next year, right? If we actually have people to hang around and vote on these things and start to really turn the ship around. I think there's, especially here in Area 6, like there's like multiple really good candidates here in Area 6 for the board. So it's exciting to see some of that kind of stuff. But anyway, thought it was worth mentioning. I'm not abandoning ship right for sure right now. There's rumors and rumblings about new orgs being created and so on and so forth. Not against that at all. I think it'd be pretty cool to see some new stuff happen. But the fact of the matter is, it's going to be a long time before it comes anywhere close to providing the high level of competition that USPSA does. And even if it begins to start to do that, if it's not a part of IPSC, like, it's really not ever going to provide the high level of competition that USPSA does, because it's not going to include some of the best shooters in the world in our sport. So I don't think it's too late to right the ship. Hopefully, we just gotta get some good people involved. So that's kind of my take on that. But anyway, Nationals was great. It was really interesting. It was, officiating was a little bit of a mixed bag in a couple points. I've heard that, over the years, and definitely found it to be true. There was some of the stages were phenomenally run, very, very well. There was one stage in particular, like I saw an FTSA on steel scored as a hit. Like, the steel was still standing after the stage. It was scored as a hit.
Yikes.
And that goes to shooter integrity as well, I think. I mean, obviously the ROs were completely clueless about it, but me and another guy were, after I got the whole story after the fact, me and another guy were standing down range by the steel, and we were like yelling back to the ROs and people up range, like, "Hey, did they score this? Can we reset this? I don't want to touch this steel until they've like definitely seen it." And they were like asking and talking about it, and then I got like a thumbs up, like, "Yep, you can go ahead and reset it." So we reset it, walk up back in range, and one of the nationally known shooters on my squad comes over to me and he's like, they just scored that as all hits on steel. And apparently the shooter had walked up to the ROs and was like, "Hey, how did you score the steel?" And they were like, they looked at him like he was crazy, and they were like, "No, it's all good on steel." And he was like, "Oh, okay, except," and then like gave us the thumbs up, like, "You can go ahead and reset the steel." And I was just like, bro. So interesting to see that kind of stuff. Side note to competitors out there, man. It's like, yeah, I think we should all be trying to get the scores we actually deserve and that we actually shoot. Regardless of which way you're arguing a call. I argued several calls against me at Nationals, as well as in my favor, and didn't win any of them. But point being, trying to get the actual scores that I shot. But so that was pretty interesting. Steel was a massive issue, not just for me, but for other folks. There was big poppers all over the range, not falling when we shot them.
There's so many problems with big poppers, man. Like, that's common everywhere. Like, I've had that happen to me a bunch. It's really
it happens to everybody, right? And it's just laughable. I mean, obviously, big poppers, and the exact same thing that happened to me at Nationals. I mean, it literally cost JJ the national championship last year. and their solution was like, oh, well, let's just do the same calibration process we've been doing the whole time twice. That'll fix it. And it definitely doesn't. It's pretty wild. I don't know what your guys' take on it is. I think that Troy's whole argument that steel is supposed to essentially detect power, and is like another point of testing the power factor of your ammo is just absolute crap. Like that makes no sense at all. We're literally talking about like a bolt is the calibration device for this steel. And the only calibration that's done is like someone shoots it and sees if it falls over. It's not like it's actually calibrated to where if you're like exactly at power factor, it's going to fall. And if you're a little bit under, it doesn't. And even if you could do that, like you can't tell me there's not differences in the same power factor, but different weights, bullets, like how much energy is getting transferred to the steel and like shooting it from different places and like all this kind of stuff. Like it doesn't make sense.
I mean, the fact that they use that and then you have like a really detailed chrono process, which I think is a good process, right? Like they take the average of a bunch of rounds, right? And then they try to use like an old beat up piece of like you said, muddy, rusted, painted, like 4-inch bolt. It's like
it changes all day,
dude. I don't know.
but that's a great point, because like that's the whole issue, is that the chrono process at nationals is a complete joke. Just to be completely honest, right? So like 2 weeks ago, I shot the North Carolina section match, right? Like the way that they do it is like without telling you what stages are going to happen on, essentially. You just like go shoot a stage, and after one of the stages, an RO walks up to you with a bag and is like, give me 8 rounds out of the mag you just shot. Like that makes a lot of sense, right? I show up on my first day of nationals, and before we've even like done the stage squad briefing or whatever, before I even had my gun on, I just like walk up onto the range, set my range bag down, and the lady's like, hey, I'm going to need 8 rounds from you at some point. And I was like, oh, okay. And I just went over to my range bag and like dug into my range bag and came back with 8 rounds in my hand. Like that was the level of accountability for chrono at freaking nationals, right? And still people were shooting sub-minor at chrono. But anyway, yeah, so I guess that's why they're trying to say, oh, we need some more accountability on various stages, because like the chrono process is a joke. But still,
well, like easy, fix the chrono process.
Exactly right. Yeah. So anyway, I would absolutely be in favor. Either you can fix this very easily one of two ways. Either get rid of big poppers, right? It's not an issue on small poppers. Or just like at majors, they have to paint all the steel for every single shooter. Why doesn't any hit on steel just count? So,
yeah, I dig that.
Seems
paint
like an
the
easy
steel.
thing.
If you can see it's a hit, it's a freaking hit. And if it didn't fall down, and you're going to call it a mic after the dude made power factor, then that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
Well, you would think if that happened, you would probably be inclined to adjust the steel after that, right?
Yeah.
So the last time this happened to me at nationals, right? It was probably, I don't know, it was about 10 or 11 in the morning. It's been shooting for several hours. Shoot the steel. And of course, it's a classic situation where there's like 4 big poppers, and my next target's way over here. And these poppers are at like 10 yards, right? So obviously I come through and I go ding, 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 and I'm on to the next one. Like you cannot sit there and watch those things fall, right? Like you're going to be so far behind. One of them didn't fall. RO comes up to me and is like, yeah, we've had a bunch of calls for calibration on that target today.
Sweet.
And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? And I was like, have you adjusted it? And they're like, no, it keeps passing calibration.
Mm-hmm.
Word. So 6 hours later, it finally, that same piece of steel finally fails when Trayvon Barber shoots it. It fails calibration. And I'm told the ROs were like still standing around the stage arguing over whether or not to adjust the steel even after it failed calibration. So pretty frustrating. Yeah, but anyway, super interesting match. It was a completely different experience from any match I ever shot. In that, well, first of all, it was over 3 days, which was a very, very different. Day 1 and 2, I felt pretty squared away. Day 3, I was pretty wore out. And it's always interesting to me. I think when fatigue really sits in, the vision is the first thing to go, for sure. For me, it's just you stop seeing spots.
Yeah, 100%.
So quickly. But yeah, pretty interesting from that aspect, for sure. Pretty interesting stages. It was not really bad. It wasn't like super great, but it wasn't bad either. A lot of people complained about stage 1, which was the one where you had to run around and shoot a bunch of targets, strong hand, and then do it again like weekend, right? I actually kind of dug that stage. It was one of my best stages for the match. But I thought it was actually I thought that was a way. I don't know if you guys even saw the stage I'm talking about, but it was a way better test, I think, of like practical single hand shooting than like your typical like stand and deliver classifier stuff. You know what I mean? Like it was actually a really good test. Like, do I wish it could have not been Virginia count? Like, sure. Like, yeah, I don't really care Virginia count, right? But as far as like you actually had to do like aggressive single-handed like entries and exits, and decide if you wanted to shoot targets on the move and all this kind of stuff, and I thought it was really good, and it was a good test, and it was a good enough test they didn't really have to include single-handed stuff for the rest of the match. So it's pretty good. A lot of interesting stages. Started on my first stage of the whole match wasn't the all steel stage, which was suboptimal, but we survived it. We survived that one, so it was pretty good. But yeah. So anyway, I had 3 pieces of steel that didn't go down for me, so that hurt my placements a lot. But I pretty much would have been right where I wanted to be for the match, so was pretty happy with that overall. Had did have the bill drill competition, which was pretty fun. Threw down a 133.
Unreal, dude. Freaking real.
Which was the fastest time with all the hits in the correct A zone for the match. So that was pretty cool. It was a lot of fun.
Like where you were aiming?
Correct. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Nice. Like kind of in the center of the target,
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, it's pretty fun. I think I massively screwed up the strategy for that, because I went over there. We were scheduled to go to that like sponsors section like on the first day, so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna roll up there. You had to pay $20 for every 2 attempts. I was like, I'm just gonna go there and do like a class demo like build drill speed at like 160, and we'll see what happens. But the problem with that was, like I said it on day 1, and there was like 3 days for guys to go like drop $400 on attempts and like try to hook up eventually. I feel like if I just hadn't shot it on day 1, I could have like went and dropped like a 150 or something on day 3. At the end of the day, I probably just won it. But yeah, made us work for it a little bit, but that was pretty fun. But yeah, I met a lot of good people. I think if I had to say one takeaway for me to work on, it's actually something I've considered a strength, right? So I've always considered shooting on the move to be a strength for me. In that I'm pretty good at like shooting really precise, like difficult targets, like on the move, but kind of slowly, right? And I'm also pretty good at like super aggressive, like entries and exits, and like shooting on the move, like close targets, that kind of thing. I think honestly the biggest takeaway that I realized for me for the match though was like mid-range targets on the move. Just getting sloppy with the vision, not really seeing spots well enough in the center of those targets, just, throwing a lot of Charlies basically.
Like level 2 targets?
Yeah. Which if you have, a stage, it's like half of the points are those targets. Like you can't shoot all Charlies on those,
Yeah.
So that's definitely gonna be a focus for me, I think. Next few months is a lot of those like fast pace, aggressive movement, confirmation 2 targets. All alphas.
So did you do anything specific to prepare for Nats, and are you going to do anything different for next year in preparation for the match?
So I didn't do as much as I wanted to. Some of my schedule is not in my control. Like I think Ohio Range Day was the weekend before Nats. 2 weeks before. No, it was 2 weekends before Nats. So basically what I did, and I think it worked out fairly well. It just worked. It just my training plan kind of came together the week after Nats, which was North Carolina section, and was feeling really, really good for the section match. I felt like I shot a perfect match. I mean, obviously you never shoot a perfect match, but as far as like perfectly at my ability, made essentially no mistakes, like mental mistakes, anything like that. I had 2 bad rounds. Like it wasn't my ammo, but I had 2 like really light charges that cost me like 2+ seconds on 2 stages. One of which would definitely have been a stage win. So that knocked me down, but I still was in 3rd place for the section. But so for me, going into it, I thought a lot about how to train. I basically decided to shoot as many majors and like big matches as I could. I felt like that was the most important thing for me to work on going into nationals. It's like not trying to get faster. That's, at the, a couple weeks before nationals or anything like that. It's execution mode training. And that was my focus in training as well. It's just, stage simulation and that kind of stuff. But I feel like for me, a really important part of it is shooting matches, because it's just a different mindset. And it works those skills in a different way than you can really work on your own on the range, where, you're not someone else is setting up the stages. It may or may not be stages that or are built. I learned a lot from one of the ones I shot. I guess the week before nationals, I made a ton of stage planning errors. Because my style typically, and it usually works out really well, the matches that I shoot, is trying to blend all the positions, trying to stop shooting as little as possible, trying to shoot everything on the move, that kind of thing. And the stages they built at Georgia like really, really rewarded crashing into the ports, shooting all the stuff, then running over to the next spot and like shooting all the stuff. And it's like some of those stages, like I never in a million years would have thought that was the stage plan, but it was. So some of those definitely learned a lot from some of those matches that definitely applied and at nationals and so forth. But yeah, worked out pretty good. Obviously, I'd like to shoot a lot more rounds. Guys like Max come out and like, yeah, I just went up to like 1,200 rounds a day for 2 weeks before nationals to get ready, and I'm like, yeah, that probably works pretty good. But I don't know if that's in the cards or not. We'll see. There is levels to this stuff, as it turns out.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I don't know. Not a whole lot been going on with me. I did go down to Waxahachie, Texas, and took Night Fighter carbine with Chuck Pressburg.
Oh yeah, I want to hear about that.
That was pretty interesting. I guess it wasn't carbine. It was carbine and pistol. I guess it's just called Night Fighter, something. That's pretty interesting. Chuck's pretty well respected in the night vision space. He's been kind of in that space for a long time, has consulted for a lot of projects, a lot of lasers and things like that are currently on the market and in wide use and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty interesting to hear his take on a lot of stuff. I would say fairly it's interesting, right? Like I'm not dissing his class or anything, right? But he has a very different like teaching style than like just what I'm used to, right? So
Yeah.
So zero technique, like doesn't talk about any technique for anything whatsoever, right?
Wow.
Everything is just here's how you apply night vision. Here's how this drill or this exercise is different in the dark. Here's how you want to utilize your laser or your nods with different focus or whatever it is, right? It was all just kind of like how to for like specific to like nods and lasers and illuminators, and none of it was shooting technique like whatsoever. Like I'm not even sure if I ever even saw him correct anybody or like offer a tip other than like hit the target. Like I think the only thing he like talked about as far as technique was like how to shoot seated, kind of grounding the gun, which is a great technique. We use that a lot at Edge. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting for 2 days to do that much shooting. A lot of the drills were kind of unsupervised, so like he would talk through it. He would give a lot of context about why he thought that drill was important, and then we would just like shoot it a lot. So yeah, it was pretty interesting. Like I think he and Bill Blowers are pretty well respected in the night vision space. So it's kind of interesting to take the class. Gave me a little bit of perspective, like on the class that we teach. Like I'm pretty dang happy with the night vision class at Edge, because like we do performance shooting under nods, and are like quite literally thinking about doing like USPSA stages under nods, like in the future for some other stuff. I think that kind of stuff is really cool. And there's like specific stuff with night vision that is like hard, like wide transitions. Yeah. Like really hard. So I don't know. It was interesting. It was a good time. I think whatever he's doing is working for him. Like he's selling out classes and stuff. But yeah, it's interesting from like my background to go to a class where just the background of that instructor is just couldn't be more different than me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also very interesting to see how many people who were there who like have not trained much at all, and were taking that class.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't know if they know what all is out there, but it was like, all right, man, like I'm here and this is the training, and it's like, let's get it done. And yeah, I don't know. Pretty interesting. But
yeah,
I think there's a lot to be said for pushing performance under pretty much any context.
I feel like there's a few interesting points there. First of all, I feel like that's actually what a lot of people are looking for in a night vision class specifically, but even like a low light class, it's like here's how to use this equipment in the dark, and then like here's an opportunity for you to shoot a bunch in the dark. Like that's like what people want. Actually,
they're looking for reps, man,
which is wild. I've taken classes very much like that. Yeah, which is it's an interesting flavor for sure. I wonder.
I did win a B8 related drill though, and that was very unlike me. And I was like, "Gosh dang!"
I'm so disappointed in you. I do wonder. I would assume his classes like that are not night vision or whatever, like because he actually does like shooting classes. I assume maybe a different style, but I don't know. I haven't never trained with Chuck before. You think no?
I know, no, they are not. Okay. So like if you take no fail pistol, it's like stop missing the black of the B8 and start hitting it more. And if you don't, I'll tell you why that would get you killed overseas.
Okay, fair enough. All right, well, good to know. Good to know.
Oh, lots of VTAC barricades as well. I am now extremely proficient at shooting on my offside. on a VTech barricade. I'm very good at it.
All 9 of the holes?
Yeah, I think we did like 6 positions. So like you had to do like 2 positions on the left side, 2 positions in the center, 2 positions on the right side, and out of the 6, 3 of them had to be on your opposite shoulder. With the lasers is not so bad.
Yeah,
because you just peek around the other side.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't make much difference.
Um,
Yeah, but you guys should definitely run like a night vision / low light match. I don't understand why you're not doing that already. That would be incredible.
yeah, it's kind of a lot of work to set those up, but
It's literally not like you already set up a match,
yeah, but then we'd have to come out Sunday though,
and you could
and then
just
there'd be
also
like,
run it
and then there'd
in
be
the
like
dark.
4 people that have like night vision, and all 4 of those guys would come.
You could run a night vision division and a white light division.
Yeah, that would be fun.
That is cool.
I do have a lot more say over our club. The previous match director has stepped down, and so now it's me and a couple other guys who are just kind of like running it by ourselves.
Yep.
And so we've already talked about like leaving the stages set up after Saturday and then shooting them with ARs the next day. I think that would be pretty cool because there's no places to go like run like a duty style rifle hard with like hit factor scoring. Like it just doesn't exist. So
Yeah,
I think that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, there's some places we could go with it for sure.
I feel like when you and I did that this summer, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a good time.
It was a good time.
Yeah.
So I guess this kind of pivots into the one thing I thought we could kind of current events discussion, a couple things. So I guess we can get kind of specific about it, right? So there was a live well, Matt Brennecke, Ben Sager have been like going after all the people right on the interwebs. Specifically, I guess, folks that are considered to be like old school instructors, right? That are pushing a lot of outdated information and things like that. They recently did one with Travis Haley was on as well, which I thought was incredible. I think it's one of the, it's like the fact that like some of those conversations are actually happening might be like the best thing, in my opinion, for the training community. Like it's happened in a long time. Really cool to see. Travis is one of those guys that, obviously is like responsible for most of us like being here. Which I know Brennan, I guess Brennan came in like way after all that, I feel like, but like
I don't owe him shit.
Like so many people, like I'm not sure, Nick, like where you kind of like so many people. I basically like started with the Magpul videos, right? Like that was like my first look into like seriously, that was my first look into like, oh crap, like there is like some real training going out there. Like you can run these guns like really hard and really fast and really accurate and do a lot of cool stuff. And like you don't have to be in the military to do it. Like just like normal people can go do it. And that was really my first window into this whole world that we're in. And he was that for a lot of people. And Travis also, I think, was, back then was considered like a way out of the box thinker. And he's never been afraid to, to be that. And still, like some of the things I learned some of the things from him that, I still use to this day. Travis was the first guy I saw doing like ever that I saw doing like sub 0.7 draws on a head box, like on the internet. Right. Like I was like, dang, like you can do that, and I was like, okay, well, he can do it. So I can definitely go do it, and that went out and worked on it. Right. He was a big inspiration. But with that said, like obviously I think there's room for anybody to grow. And if you push the same stuff for long enough without really changing, it's going to become outdated and new stuff's going to come along. And I think there's definitely better ways to do things. So it was a fascinating conversation, for sure. But I guess I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on, because here's the interesting side of it, I think. So what some people are essentially saying is like, a couple arguments I've heard. Well, I can't fix the internet. I don't really care what anyone else out there is doing, so I'm not really paying attention to it. I'm just going to do me, right? And that's the way a lot of people think about it. All the way to the far extreme of like, hey man, I think if you're like calling out other instructors and things that they're saying, that's like super unprofessional. And it, you like, we definitely shouldn't be doing that. It's a bad look for the training community. Why are you trying to tear people down that are out there trying to help people get better and that are, probably overall net positive influences and so on and so forth. So anyway, I'm fascinated to hear your guys' thoughts. Like, what do you think? All of us are kind of a part of this instructor community, although we're not as probably big and well known as guys like Travis Haley, right? But still, what do you think our responsibility is? What do you think the way do you think we should be policing our own? Like, what are your thoughts on the way that we should, handle crap in the industry when we see it, or what do you think is the right way to go about educating people and trying to call out bad apples?
So I'm like you, man. Like, I started off with the Magpul DVDs, and I 100% believe that if it wasn't for the Magpul DVDs, I don't think the training industry would be like what it is today, at least in terms
100%.
of civilians taking classes, right?
Yep.
Like those DVDs made that a really cool thing. And it was something that a lot of people had never seen before. So I have a ton of respect for that guy. That being said, I think that people, they misconstrue what is actually being said, right? Like, if someone gets called out, like, they might not be getting called out because of the type of personality or the type of dude that they are. A lot of the time they're getting called out because of what is being said, right? The information that's being put out, which I feel like is a really good thing, right? If you're new to shooting, right? Like, I think it's, and you look at the internet, I think it's very, very difficult to decipher what is really good. What should I be working on? What should I be focusing on? And so I think those talks are really, really good, right? And I think a lot of people forget, like, if something is worth talking about, the chances of someone being offended is pretty damn high, right? And that is okay, right? It's okay. And the thing is, like, if someone or a group of people is being offended, it's probably a pretty damn important topic to talk about, right? So I welcome that stuff. I honestly, like, I dig what they're doing. I dig the Redneck podcast, man. And again, it's not about calling out people's personality. Like, dude, I'm sure fucking Two Lamb is a really nice guy, but the shit that he puts out is straight up fucking AIDS. Like, I'm sorry if that offends you, but, like, prove me wrong. Like, it's AIDS. So I think that stuff is really good. I think it's good. I think the conversation between several people is a very good thing. And I have a ton of respect for Travis and Trevor, for that matter, for getting on there and having a conversation with those two dudes who are, number one, very good at what they do, and also a super intense group of people.
It's one way to put it. It's one way to put it. Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. I guess for me, there's a couple different ways that I've thought about it and continue to look at it. So, there's when I see some crap on the internet, right? Like everybody else, I want to call it out because there's, especially if it comes, this is part of what they talk about the live, but especially when it's coming from like a quote unquote position of authority. There's so many folks out there that will just take anything that guy says as gospel, right? And so unless someone out there, unless someone's out there calling it out, like there's people that are just taking that, lock, stock, and barrel. So the question is, right, is it more fruitful to call out the bad advice, the bad technique, whatever, and say, hey, guys, I'm still seeing this freaking technique everywhere. Here's why it's crap. right? Or is it better to say, hey, man, just so everybody knows, this guy is a clown and you should never, pay attention to anything he has to say, right? I think there's times for both, right? I feel like there are guys in the industry that I disagree with on a lot of stuff, like a lot, but I still think they're a net positive. Like I'm glad they're out there doing what they're doing. I think they're still getting people into shooting. They're helping make people better, even though I disagree with him on a lot of stuff, right? And the fact that he's wrong about some stuff is okay. And so when I see that kind of stuff, I'll still call out the technique and be like, look, here's why I think you don't have to have like a muzzle high presentation on your appendix draw, right? And of course, whenever I post that, Brennan will be like, Brennan messages me like, why are you calling this guy out again? And I'm like, I'm calling it the technique. But there are certain people that I've definitely posted about where I'm like you said, Nick, like everything this guy puts out is just bad for anybody who's listening. And I think it's fair to warn people off of that. But
especially when it's like misapplied, like when it's maybe borrowed and misapplied, like that's where I think it's very dangerous because it sounds similar to like what would be really good, and then it's just being applied in like this really terrible like I don't know, like I think that's super dangerous. Like if somebody just comes up with a bunch of like original ideas and they're terrible, like I don't know, like I view that as like a little like way better than somebody like murdering someone else's fantastic techniques and things that they teach. But I don't know. I think there's a pretty big difference.
No, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. So anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting. I think there's sometimes there's just stuff that's so bad, that I'm not afraid to call people out. It's like I posted about the Mike Glover dry fire stuff, recently, and it's like that was like a really dumb thing to say, right? And so I'm gonna call that out. But at the same time, like I don't know Mike from Adam. I think Mike over the years has said a lot of dumb stuff. I think he's also said a lot of really great stuff. You know what I mean? And so I don't know, that's not a guy where I'm like, hey, Mike Glover is just out to lunch. No one should ever go train with him. Like I don't know. I've never taken his class. But I still think like, man, when you come out and say stuff that can be that hurtful to people that are trying to get better, it's like somebody's got to call it out. Like you can't just let that stuff go,
And I think if you approach that stuff from a position of like, look, I care about people and the fact that they want to get better, and like I'm going to approach it from a like, hey, I want to do this to save you this headache. Right. Versus I want to do this out of a place of pride and ego. And I just want to like shit on other people. Like, I think that's a really big difference. If your critique is coming kind of like from that place. I also think that like, I think that Ben and Matt, I guess, I guess it's primarily Matt. Like, I think that there's a big difference in the kind of like calling out that goes on in like comments. And then the kind of like if you only looked at like Ben and Matt and how they comment on posts, you'd be like, these guys are just assholes, right? And then you actually listen to them get on the Redneck Live or whatever, and they're super respectful and they reason through things and they talk through things.
I wouldn't know. I don't know if I'd say super respectful on Ben's behalf, but
yeah, that's fair. But it comes off way less like the point is you get the rest of the context of like what he was trying to communicate in like a 6-word comment, right? And I think that like even just as content moves on, like a few years ago, the idea of listening to, what are we at, 54 minutes here? A 54-minute podcast would just be outrageous, right? Like people didn't do that. And like, I think like even Joe Rogan's podcast, like where he starts and he just like goes for like 2.5, 3 hours or whatever. That's new, but like, I think he's almost kind of set a cool precedent. And I like to see it start trickling into our community where it's like Joe Rogan, like a pretty classic liberal, has had on so many different people where he just like, okay, sit down right there across the table from me and let's talk about all of this stuff for long enough to actually hash it out. And I think podcasts, lives, stuff like that is a good way to start kind of countering that and get out of the comments.
100%.
And get out of the short little quippy DMs or the emoji comments or whatever. Like that doesn't do anything, right? But conversations 100%. Do. And if we can do that over like a video call, like, dude, let's do that, right? So
right.
in that sense, I think that's just, it's phenomenal. Whether or not I agree with like all of the content or the people that they have problems with or not, like that's kind of besides the point, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Yeah, like when you see a Steger comment on Haley's post, going, "Dude, you're out of your freaking mind." Like that does not accomplish anything, right? All the Haley guys are on Haley's side. All the Steger guys are on Steger's side. Like no one's crossing over. No one's understanding anything.
Right.
We're just kind of throwing insults at that point. Versus, like you said, actually sit down and have a conversation, and maybe you agree on some stuff, maybe you don't, but everyone actually I think has a better understanding, and maybe folks can learn some things. Pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think when those conversations happen, like it's pretty rare for people to get up from that conversation and just be like really pissed off with the other dude. Like it's really rare. Like if you're able to actually have that conversation. But like I see a lot of people getting pissed off and blocking and all this stuff like on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, like it's not that, like you're taking this a little too seriously, I think,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's wild. There's a lot of alpha male door kickers in this industry have very fragile egos and cannot take anyone disagreeing with them or calling them out at all. And that says a lot, I think. Says a lot for sure. It's an interesting parallel, I think, as well, right? So let me say it this way. So I have seen it said on the internet very frequently, right, that anybody who posts like positive things about products at any time, but doesn't post negative reviews about products is just obviously like a shill and a sellout, and you shouldn't believe anything they're saying. What's your guys' take on that?
Yeah, I mean,
before I spoil it.
Yeah, I mean, dude, typically, I mean, I'll say negative shit about stuff, 100%. Like, I'll tell you what I don't like about it. I mean, if we're talking about something like, a fucking swamp fox, red dot on your pistol, like, this is going to be negative, right? You don't need that. But I mean,
but here's the thing: you're not going to spend the time to film a YouTube video review of a swamp fox.
No, sir.
Let alone shoot 5,000 rounds through it, so you can really say how it performed and stuff.
But if you did, you'd have more subscribers on YouTube. So I'm just throwing that out there, especially if you do unboxing videos.
Yeah, I don't know.
Here's my take on it. Right, there is for every good product out there that you would recommend to people, there's 300 really bad ones, right? And you can never warn people away from all the bad products that are out there. Like you just can't. And so I when it comes to products, I'm not afraid to call bad products, but I feel like it's so much more beneficial to just say, here's the stuff you should look at. Go look at this stuff. And just don't worry about everything else, because you can't post a bad product review and be like, oh, here's the bad scope. All the other ones that are out there are good. That's never.
It's not helpful.
Not helpful at all. And so I think it's way better. It's way more fruitful, way better use of my time to be like, hey, here's the stuff that I use all the time. It's great. This is what I recommend.
Yeah, I think I think with anything, be balanced about it, right? If it's something that every single part of it is just terrible, why would you waste your time? But if there's aspects of this, we'll just go LPVOs, right? There's aspects of this LPVO that you love and then there's like one thing that you hate, and then and you're essentially making lists, like pros and cons lists, right? Like I think that's super helpful for people because they can actually kind of help weigh their decision and kind of check out the metrics by which you measure your gear. Like that's super important. And so if you're leaving out all the negative stuff and just letting them like assume what's negative, like I don't know that that's necessarily helpful, right? And so like I think there's a big difference between that and then like publicly crapping on some product, like in Instagram comments or an Instagram post or a YouTube video, like specifically. Like, man, like I don't know that that's necessarily helpful. Kind of same thing with instructors, right? Like I could say, yeah, like I trained with X, Y, and Z instructor, and here are the things that I really liked. There were some things I didn't like, and like you can just like take that for what it's worth if like my recommendation means anything to you. And I think it's the exact same thing with products as well. I think people are pretty careful like about cutting ties or burning bridges because the industry is actually super, super small as far as like industries go in general. And so that's always something to take into consideration too. Like I'll say straight up. So people who would like look to me for optic recommendations, like I work for Vortex Optics, I shoot Vortex dots, right? And so like on my Instagram, like I'm not going to talk about other brands of optics that I think are really freaking awesome, right? But if you DM me or if you're listening to this podcast, right, I'll tell you like I think the SRO is like probably the best optic on the market right now, right? I think there's I think the Vortex Venom is way more durable than it looks. Different stuff like that. So like I'll have an honest conversation. I think it just comes down to that, like being able to have the honest conversation and answer questions honestly. But I do think there's a pretty big difference between that and then like making your content all about like what's good and what's crap.
And I think there's a huge difference too in people that actually use this shit to form an opinion, and then those that get paid to post pictures of it, right? Like,
dude, 100%.
We have to be able to tell the difference in those two different types of personalities, I guess you'd call it, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, unfortunately, I think the ones that actually use this stuff are a lot smaller pool of dudes than the ones that get paid to post pictures.
Oh yeah, 100%, man. Like if you're a better shooter than you are a photographer, then like you're not going to do as well on those product review type stuff. Like straight up. Mm-hmm. Like
I'll tell you straight up, right? So I shoot for Zev, right? I'm a big fan of my OZ9s. Still what I use in a match gun. Obviously, I really don't make anything off of Zev, but you know, even if I did, like that wouldn't be enough for me to use a gun I didn't like, right? But especially when they first came out, like every gun when it's brand new. Tend to be some things that you find out over the first year or two of that gun being out there. Like there was some known issues, right? There was a couple of bad parts. All the Zevs that I had that ever had a problem, none of them had a problem before like 6,000 to 10,000 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that your gun went 1,000 rounds with no issues like means absolutely nothing to me. Like
nope.
And
nope.
So, but guess what? I don't care who you are. There's no full-time reviewers out there doing 10,000 round reviews on guns. Like that's just not a thing, Yeah. And so, yeah, it's really tough to.
No, and dude, dragging it down the street is not a fucking review, right? Like straight up, like
correct.
Actually using it is a review. Right, becoming intimately involved with how it works, how it feels, all of that jazz. If we're talking about guns, like that's a review,
dude. That is big fucking facts. Like, use the item or the product as it was designed to be used, and like use it often and frequently. But check out this thing. I'm gonna hit it with a hammer and roll over it with the tank. And it's like, no, that's not what it is designed for. Like that's gravel that you're thinking of, right? Like, like not a scope or like a trigger or something. That's big facts, man. That's yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I've had dudes are like tell me, like they'll be like, "Hey, what red dot are you running?" Like they're not even asking for recommendation. It's like, "What red dot are you running?" Well, man, like on 2 of my guns, I've got the Vortex Venom, right? They're like, "Oh yeah, man, I don't like that optic." I'm like, "All right." And they're like, "Well, it's really unreliable." I'm like, "All right." And
Dude.
they're like, "Why do you have it on your gun?" And I was like, "Well, since I started at Vortex like a year ago, like I've been putting like 2,000, 3,000 rounds through those optics like a month, and have not had any problems with them. And so like to me, they work really good for that, like for shooting." And they're like, "Yeah, but what if you fucking drop it?" I was like, "Well, I haven't, so they still work great." And they're like, "Well, man, like if I just like I'm just really worried about dropping my gun." And I was like, "Then don't get it, man. Like like get one that's like rubber or something." Like I don't know, man. Like it's really crazy.
So here's my favorite shit. They're like, "What optics do you use?" And I'm like, "SRO." And they're like, "Well, Aaron Cowan broke it." And I'm like, no,
Every
no
time.
shit.
Every time.
Like he sets out to break it. So like, no kidding, he broke it. And so and
what's funny too is he tells
one
everybody.
You get on that for why that's realistic. What's the number one defense you get for that? Why the drop test means something?
People are like, "Well, if it's in my holster, I could bump it or something like that." And it's
so
like,
you're telling me you're running a duty holster with a red dot that is not an RDS holster that has like a hood over the red dot when your gun's in the holster? That's
that red dot's just like flapping out there in the breeze.
That is the same answer I get every freaking time, I feel like. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to hit your red dot while it's inside of your RDS holster? Yeah. Like on your duty belt.
Well, what's funny about Aaron, man, like so many people take his videos out of context. Like he will tell you straight up and has like on YouTube videos, like, "Hey, like I dropped these on concrete from 6 feet, like on purpose. Like this is not what I expect people to be doing with these optics, but people want the drop, and so I do the drop." And people are like, "Oh, realistic training, like realistic product reviews." Yeah, it's very funny. I'm very humored by it all.
The holster thing is a super great point. I mean, dude, I can't tell you how many like unit dudes I've seen with freaking Delta points, and it's just fine because it's stuffed in that freaking Safariland RDS bucket with a damn hood over the top of it. Like, it's just fine.
Problem solved. Delta point still sucks, but yeah, problem solved.
Will the electronics work? I don't know, but we're not worried about breaking the glass because we dropped it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good times. All right, fellas. I feel like we've trashed enough people and products for one episode.
This was fun
of the Speed Up and Get Your Hits podcast. Thanks you guys for being here. For our listeners, if you're looking for good folks to train with, all of information for our hosts will be down below. If you're not following these guys, make sure to look them up and follow Nick and Brennan. Train with these guys if you get an opportunity. I promise you will not regret it. And until next time, this was Speed Up and Get Your Hits. Thanks, guys.